Hello and welcome back to Nathan Bell's podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe and share with your friends. Today, Nate would like to talk about Dyson Spheres.
Yeah, so today I'm going to talk about this article I've read on CNN about a study which looked at 5 million stars, the article says. The study looked at 5 million stars, specifically looking for Dyson spheres. So if you don't know what a Dyson sphere is, a Dyson sphere is a theoretical artificial structure which would be built by an advanced civilization, which would be mirrors or solar panels that would surround the star, collecting all of its energy to provide the power needs of the advanced interstellar civilization. Now, the inventor of Dyson Spheres said this wouldn't be a structure that surrounded the star entirely. It would actually be a collection of small structures, small objects, panels and mirrors, which would be in orbit on different orbital paths around the star, harnessing the energy of the star. So this study, I'm just quoting the article, I'm looking at the article for this video in CNN, and this study looked at 5 million stars in the Milky Way galaxy and suggested that they had found 7 candidates that might be hosting Dyson spheres. So what they're looking for is they're looking for heat radiation, which is excess heat which would be emanating off the objects in orbit around the star. And by looking at seeing these signatures of heat radiation, they can determine that there are objects in orbit around the stars. So of course they have to rule out other possibilities for what could be giving off this heat radiation, and there are numerous other things that could be giving off this heat radiation. For example, there could have been a planetary collision, and there could be pieces of a planet floating around the star, which could be giving off these signatures. So before they can determine that there is a Dyson sphere at any of these 7 stars, they have to rule out all other possibilities of what could be emanating this heat radiation off into space, which the telescopes are seeing. So it's interesting to think, you'd think this idea of a Dyson sphere would be ridiculous and wouldn't really be achievable. Imagine the mammoth construction effort to build a structure around a star, which the absolute mammoth size of even the smallest stars, being absolutely dwarfing the planets that they host. Means that and the need for materials, the raw materials you would need to build a structure large enough to be surrounding a star is just phenomenal. And the article says at one point that it was speculated that you would need more materials than are available on the Earth in order to build a Dyson sphere. So a species would have to be very advanced before they'd be able to build a Dyson sphere, because they'd need materials from other planets, because they wouldn't, if we wanted to build a Dyson sphere, we wouldn't have enough materials on the Earth to do it. We would need to collect materials from other planets in the solar system, and probably from as many planets in the solar system and moons in the solar system as possible, in order to actually have enough materials to build this structure which surrounds the star. So the species would have to be able to easily be able to travel between the different planets in their solar system to gather up the materials necessary to surround the star, because obviously stars are enormous. The sun is thousands of times bigger than the Earth. So the sheer amount of materials it would take to surround the sun with anything would be huge, and more than we have on the Earth. So the species would have to be interstellar and traveling at least between the other planets in their solar system. But I'll just have a look at the article and tell you a bit about what the article says. Let's have a look. It says, we started with a sample of 5 million stars and we applied filters to try to get rid of as much data contamination as possible. So they've looked at 5 million stars. You would think if there were many of these advanced civilizations out there, if the universe was populated with these highly advanced interstellar species, if there were many of them, we would see evidence of lots of Dyson spheres. Now they've looked at 5 million stars in the Milky Way galaxy, and they found out of 5 million stars, they found 7 potential hosting Dyson spheres. So obviously we can see if they had looked out and immediately upon their observations seen 10,000 potential Dyson Spheres, then we could almost say there must be Dyson Spheres out there, and there must be all these advanced civilizations that can travel between stars. But again, the lack of the appearance of only 7 candidates for Dyson Spheres out of 5 million stars shows again that there's not a lot of evidence that there are these interstellar species, because if they were out there, these interstellar species, we would expect to see an abundance of evidence for many Dyson Spheres. So again, it's this disappointing evidence that there probably aren't these interstellar species, and I've talked about this before, whether it's even possible to be an interstellar species and how difficult space travel is. So this is actually pointing more towards saying we don't immediately see evidence of lots of Dyson Spheres. We see evidence of potentially 7, and that could be other things. So again, it's evidence that there probably aren't many of these interstellar species. But it's interesting, Dyson Spheres and detecting Dyson Spheres is one of the things that we can look for. We can look for technology which leaves a visible trace that our telescopes can detect to determine whether there are these interstellar species, and if we find a Dyson Sphere, we will know that they are thousands of years more advanced than us, because it would take a species that was thousands of years more advanced than us to be able to construct this mammoth object around the sun. So Dyson Spheres is one thing to look for, one form of technology we can try and observe with our satellites to determine whether there are any interstellar species. But as I said, they've only found 7 candidates for Dyson Spheres out of looking at 5 million stars. So it doesn't seem, again, as if there is much evidence that there is an abundance of interstellar species. It seems quite the opposite, that there is little evidence that there are any interstellar species. Now, the article goes on to say that they will need to do further study and further assessment of these stars, potentially with the James Webb Telescope, to determine whether these are Dyson Spheres or just some natural phenomenon. And this will take quite a bit of time, because use of the James Webb Telescope and use of these telescopes is heavily regulated, so that basically it's shared around, so that all the scientists who need it get to have a go. So the scientists who have done this study don't get to all of a sudden use the James Webb Telescope for the next 5 years to determine whether these are Dyson Spheres. They're going to have to wait their term, so we're going to have to wait a while for this study to be concluded if there is any Dyson Spheres. But it's a really interesting subject. I really want to know if there are these interstellar species. I like to imagine that there are these species that can colonize other planets and travel around the galaxy and build constructions like a Dyson Sphere. But again, 7 candidates out of 5 million stars in the Milky Way isn't looking positive for there being super advanced interstellar species. Which is disappointing for me, a big stargazer who desperately wants there to be advanced alien civilizations. So again, we're seeing more evidence that there probably isn't these advanced alien civilizations who can travel between the stars. But if you're interested in learning what a Dyson Sphere is, you can look up the information about what a Dyson Sphere is on the internet. It was invented by a man. Now, what was his first name? Let's have a look. Freeman Dyson, renowned British-American physicist Freeman Dyson, theorized it would be a shell made up of mirrors or solar panels that completely surrounds a star, harnessing all of its energy. And he acknowledges that he took this idea from the 1937 science fiction novel written by Olaf Stapledon's called Star Maker. So he didn't come up with this, it actually comes from a science fiction novel, and he went on to create a scientific theory based on what was presented in Olaf's science fiction novel Star Maker. So yeah, it's a bit disappointing because they've only found 7 candidates in 5 million stars, so we're not seeing an abundance of Dyson Spheres. Again, if there were all these interstellar alien species that were capable of travelling around the stars and seeing other worlds and colonising other worlds, we would look up with our telescopes and we would immediately see thousands of Dyson Spheres. We don't immediately see thousands of Dyson Spheres. We see 7 possible Dyson Spheres out of 5 million stars in the Milky Milky Way. So again, it's looking improbable that there are an abundance of advanced interstellar alien species. Disappointing for me, a big stargazer who wants there to be advanced alien species, but we must accept what the truth is. So go and learn about Dyson Spheres if you're interested, and keep dreaming, stargazers, and keep imagining aliens. Drop a comment in the comment section about what you think about Dyson Spheres.